I have a quote here from the redistricting chair of the Republican National Committee in 2000 and from 2000. And he says redistricting is like an election in reverse. It's a great event. Usually the voters get to pick the politicians. In redistricting, the politicians get to pick the voters. And so, in conjunction to that, I've seen a lot of things on the redistricting Wikipedia page, which is always a good source, which I learned from my years as a researcher. Just kidding. Sorry. But why don't we have like computers do these like complex algorithms? Why don't we like, I saw so many like different equations that people have invented to like take the human and bias element out of that. What are the pros of that? Why don't we do that? Because I'm assuming there's lots of cons as anything giving stuff to a computer. So like, can you elaborate on that?
So I think Dan can expand on this a little bit, but like the programs can be as fair or as biased as the people writing them. A lot of the most gerrymandered districts in the country, I believe I've heard that this is the case in like Pennsylvania and North Carolina, were drawn by algorithms that were intentionally partisan. But I'm less familiar with the extent of automation here in our state.
So the whole thing about the computers, right, is that, yes, for every 10 maps I can draw, a computer can draw a million maps, right? But the thing about computers is that, in my opinion, they fundamentally miss the human element of redistricting, right? If you look at a lot of algorithm-based maps, they split a bunch of counties or split a bunch of cities and stuff like that. And while you can code in variables to prevent that, a computer isn't going to know that. Let's see here. Pull something out of my hat. That Duncan, Oklahoma, and Waurika, Oklahoma, have similar economies based around the same business, Halliburton, and should belong in a district together. The only way you're going to get that is by talking to people that live there, or by being from the area, or by going through, by basically figuring out, what the people who live there want. And it's really hard to code for that kind of qualitative data. I hear about every couple of days, I've come up with this new mathematical formula that fixes gerrymandering. The problem is, gerrymandering isn't a mathematical problem, it's a political problem.
Right.
It's a process problem. As long as people at the helm of redistricting have a singular interest to benefit from it, then you will continue to see gerrymandering. Political science, the whole basis of political science, the whole foundation it sits on, is that politicians are single-minded seekers of re-election. That isn't an indictment of anybody, that isn't a moral judgment, it's just a fact of political science. And therefore, every judgment you make from there has to be built on this person wants to win their next election. So it makes sense that legislators, even if it's not a partisan gerrymander or a racial gerrymander, will gerrymander to protect themselves from the next election cycle.
So why do we even consider political data? From my rudimentary knowledge, all of this stuff is supposed to come from the census, right? And so while you have so much data that you gather from the national census, why are things like voting records, like political party affiliations, and things like that taken into account at all? Like, why is there no law that's like, you can only look at populations and, their race, their socioeconomic income, but like, not like in a court when the judge is like, no, you can't think that's stricken, like jury don't take that into consideration. Why isn't there something like that for gerrymandering and redistricting?
I mean, that'd be like outlawing thought crime, right? The thing is, all these legislators, they've campaigned in these areas, right? They've knocked the doors. Theoretically, they've run the ads. They know where the voters live, even if you don't put it on a map. And in Oklahoma, we do have partisan restrictions. You can't look at voter registration. You can't look at political data. but every legislator knows where the Republicans live. Every legislator knows where the Democrats live.
Mhm.
And even so, they know where their donors live. They know where the donors don't live. It can get so particular sometimes that the powers that be will say, "Well, I want this street because I know these two really rich people here that donate to my campaign live here, and I want to keep getting those $2,900 donations or whatever."
Mm.
So
That's so real. I talked to a state senator who said that this was in Norman, who said like his predecessor wanted to change this district so that it would carve out just the part of OU where his daughter's dorm was. Um, but I mean, I do think there are pros to being able to consider partisanship. You know, our state government says that they don't. But I mean, you can make a map based on race and population density that approximates that anyway. And I think when you're not even claiming to look at partisanship, it's kind of deceptive. You know, you can be more true to how proportional these districts are if you are actually like showing the hard data. And I think there is some argument potentially for shared political interests. Like you can see certain areas consistently vote different than the areas around them, and there could be good reasons for that.